Hey, what's up, folks? This is Tony Brewer. You're listening to Cogitations. Cogitations is the podcast where we think about things, we contemplate them, we turn them over in our minds, and then we discuss them. Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel writes, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." Now, we're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We're going to talk about it. Today, we're going to talk about God's love, and we're not going to do it from John 3:16, which is actually what the thumbnail is, but we're going to do it from the perspective of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We're going to, well, I've got them written down here, and I don't usually do notes for this, but we're going to look at the proper intentions of love, we're going to look at the proper practice, and we're going to look at the proper purpose. And that's what I've got for now. Before we get into the meat of our podcast, I'd like to let you know that we are sponsored by Be a Mindful Soul, www.beamindfulsoul.com. Often people need a listening ear and support as they work through the varied situations of life. Sometimes those situations are so complex and overwhelming that you need some support. This is why LaBeth started Be a Mindful Soul. At Be a Mindful Soul, LaBeth's mission is to offer anything from a listening ear and the advice of an older sister to help finding a professional in your area if needed. Be sure to go to www.beamindfulsoul.com and check out all the services that she has to offer. She can help answer your questions about therapy treatment or other mental health services that you may need. She also provides affordable assistance and support with resolving relationship conflicts, gaining and implementing more effective parenting skills, and can help coach you through the steps you need to take in regards to finding peace and stability that you deserve. So be sure and check LaBeth out at www.beamindfulsoul.com. And as I always do, for a moment, I'm going to leave the QR code up. You can go to www.buymeacoffee.com/Christianity Now, and you become a supporter there, and that gets you access to our behind the scenes stuff. You can also go to www.patreon.com and /Christianity Now and become a supporter there for as little as $1 a month. That gets you the same access to the body of work. And yeah, that's all I've got there. Taking the QR code down, it will be in the top left corner. Let's get to our chats. For those of you that are here and watching, thank you so much. Be sure and comment. Let us know who you are, where you're from. And if you're commenting on the We Talk Truth group, or I think on my personal Facebook page, it doesn't populate your name. It just says Facebook user. So if I read your comment and I don't acknowledge your name, you know the reason why. Now, let's get into our podcast. Let's talk about love. I preached a version of this on Sunday, and I thought I'd share it with you today. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is a very interesting chapter. And the reason I say that is because, now, don't throw stones at me. It doesn't need to be in the Bible in order for Paul to adequately convey the point that he's making in 1 Corinthians, the point that he's trying to convey to the church in Corinth. Now, it's good supplemental material. It helps. It shines a lot of light on some other stuff, but it's what's called an excursus in literature. It's a Pauline parenthetical. So you could take 1 Corinthians 13 in its entirety out of the text and read it, and you wouldn't lose anything germane to the point that Paul is making about desiring spiritual gifts, but you need to desire the best of those gifts, not the least of those gifts, okay? Now, that doesn't mean I think that 1 Corinthians 13 doesn't need to be in the Bible. We're greatly benefited by 1 Corinthians 13. But I just wanted to make that point because I'm going to talk just a moment about its context. Check this out. All right. Verse 24 of 1 Corinthians 12. "For our comely parts have no need, but God hath tempered the body together, having given more abundant honor to that part which lacked, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. And whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it. Or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now we are the body of Christ, and members in particular. So each individual is a member of the body of Christ. And just like people have eyes, people have hands, people have legs and feet, and people have little bitty pinky toes, everybody in the Lord's church individually represents some comely parts and some homely parts. Nobody that I know of anyway, likes looking at pinky toes. Well, I should take that back. We'll just say nobody normal really loves looking at a pinky toe over the other more comely parts. But some people are pinky toes, some people are thumbs, some people are eyes, some people are noses, some people are ears. The point that Paul is making is we shouldn't diminish the importance and look down on a part of our body just because it is not as comely as another part of our body. In other words, you're going to protect your pinky toe just like you'd protect your thumb, is the idea. All right? Now, verse 28, God hath set some in the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, governments, diversities of tongues. Are all apostles? Well, no. Are all prophets? No. Are all teachers? No. Are all workers of miracles? No. Do all have the gift of healing? No. Do all speak with tongues? No. Do all interpret? No. Then he goes on to say, but covet earnestly the best gifts. Yet I show unto you a more excellent way. Follow after love and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that you may prophesy. And the reason he said that you need to desire spiritual gifts, but rather that you may prophesy, because he that speaketh, now this is chapter 14, verse 2, for he that speaketh in an unknown tongue speaketh not unto men, but unto God, for no man understandeth him. Howbeit in the spirit he speaketh mysteries, but he that prophesieth speaketh unto men to edification and exhortation and comfort. He that speaketh in an unknown tongue edifieth himself. He that speaketh prophecies edifieth the church. So if you desire tongues, you're being selfish. If you desire prophecy, that's better. You're vaunting other people. You're lifting other people up. You're strengthening other people. That's the point. So follow after love, and if you're following after love, you are going to desire the best gift, which is prophecy, which edifies the church. You see, tongues, if you read on in the chapter 14, tongues are assigned to them that believe not. Prophecy is assigned to them that believe. So you can speak in tongues and you can get a lot of praise of men, but you're not edifying the church. If you speak prophecy and you have the gift of prophecy, you prophesy, you tell forth those things of God, and you are then edifying the church, but you're not getting as much credit, say, as somebody that speaks in tongues. That's what Paul is trying to say here. Now, he's going to explain love or charity, all right? And this isn't the kind of love that says, I love you because you love me. This is the kind of love with which God so loved the world, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ commended his love towards us. God commended his love towards us. And that's the idea. So it's a contractual, obligatory kind of love. Obligatory, that doesn't sound right. I may have made that word up. But it's contractual. God loves us because he said he loves us, and God cannot lie. God promised to love us. Now, God didn't promise to accept us in everything that we do, and God didn't promise to give us eternity in heaven with him in spite of everything we do. In fact, if you love me, keep my commandments, and you're my friends if you do what I say, John 14:15 and 15:14 respectively. But the point is this: in spite of our rebellion, in spite of our attitude, in spite of what we do, God is going to treat us lovingly. There is really no emotion tied. Now, it's not exclusive of emotion. In other words, it doesn't ban emotion, but agape love is not emotional. Agape love is logical. It's a love of reason. And anybody, and I say this all the time, Anybody who's been married longer than about 24 hours, maybe you could say anybody that's been married longer than 24 hours past their honeymoon, understands what it means to love because you stood before God and witnesses and vowed to do so. All right? What about your child? If you got a child that turns, 16, 17, 18, whatever age, and that child rebels, you know what it means to love because you are obligated to love because you decided to love. That's agape love. It's a sacrificial. I'm going to love you in spite of you. I'm going to love you with nothing in mind for return is the idea. All right. That's the kind of love. Now, it has to be with the proper intention, okay? And that's the first 3 verses of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Let's read them together and notice a few things. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not, I'm going to say love, although my King James says charity. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. Folks, acting lovingly does not profit you anything if it's not with the proper intentions. Now, I know that I said that agape love was love with no expectation of anything in return, with no expectation of profit. Therefore, what Paul is communicating here, if you are acting lovingly with the expectation of favor in return, whether it's favor in return from the object of the one whom you are treating lovingly, or whether it's internally you're expecting to get a feel good, you're expecting to get rewarded in some kind of cosmological way, your intentions matter, okay? If it's not altruistic, it's not agape love. And we have to learn this. We have to hone this skill. So though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, listen, you folks in Corinth, and look, Paul could speak with I don't know if he could speak with the tongues of angels, but he heard the tongues of angels. Go read the book of 2 Corinthians. So he could speak with the tongues of men, and he potentially could speak with the tongues of angels. But if he didn't have love, it would profit him nothing. So our acting lovingly without the proper intentions does not love make. So it doesn't profit anything. It's worthless. You are actually become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. You're like a gong or a bell that has a crack in it. Think about how a bell sounds whenever you go bing, and it's got that reverberant tail on the end, and that causes people to pay attention, to set up and pay attention. If you put your finger on that bell and then have somebody try to ring it, it just goes chink. And that may or may not get somebody's attention, but that's not going to get somebody's attention and the same way that is if the bell was working correctly and has that reverberant ting. Okay? So you're not functioning and serving your purpose if you're doing these things, but you don't have love. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have faith so that I could remove mountains. Well, folks, you could do all the miracles. And if you didn't have love, those miracles would profit you nothing. Well, Tony, if I had the ability to do miracles and I could heal the sick, and I went and lovingly healed the sick, then that would, it would profit them, but it wouldn't profit you. In fact, it may be a detriment to your soul. All right? So we have to have the proper intentions. Remember, what are the 2 great commands Jesus was asked? Well, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind, with all thy might and mind. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Now, the first thing you got to do is love God. But then you have to love yourself and then your neighbor. You see, the standard by which love for our neighbor is measured in the second great command is the love we have for ourselves. So that's why I believe Paul is focusing on this. You can act lovingly. You can do, if you, in the first century, if you could do miracles, you could be a prophet. You could be a benefit to everybody around you, but you could actually be a detriment to yourself. That's the idea. So we need to have the proper attitude, the proper intentions. Though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. You could actually live a sacrificial life for Christ, serving other people. But if you're doing it with the expectation and feeling of entitlement that you are owed something, then it's profiting you nothing. In fact, it's the very opposite. It's a detriment to you. I think about in history this character named Justin Martyr, who bragged about going to Rome and preaching the gospel. And he said, I'm going to be a martyr because that's the highest calling. And of course, he went to Rome and preached the gospel and preached in such a way that he drew the attention of the authorities and they killed him. Did it profit him anything? I don't know. I'm not the ultimate judge, but I can read the Bible and I can compare what the Bible says to what his actions were. And I think that we can reasonably infer, not necessarily, but reasonably infer that it profited him nothing. Folks, I have to act lovingly with the proper intentions, and that makes love. All right. Now let's talk about the practice. So listen to it. Here's how a loving person acts. This is verses 4 through 8. And I'm just going to offer a little bit of running commentary here. Love suffers long. Well, that doesn't need a whole lot of commentary. You know, what if your brother trespasses against you? You go to him and him alone, and if he listens to you and he repents, you've gained a brother. But if he doesn't, you carry a group, then you carry, there's one more line, and then you go before the church. But if your brother trespasses against you, is going to him and him alone, is that something you have to do? Or can you suffer long and forbear? You know, I can read in both the books of Colossians and Ephesians that Christians are to suffer long and forbear. Now, if somebody commits a sin against God, that's a different story. We have to take care of that. Paul writes in Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, Brethren, if any man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. We have to do that, right? We have to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But if my brother, and here at the Riverview Church of Christ, I use something as absurd as I could think of, wearing a blue plaid shirt. So I make the joke all the time, and one of our members always sits in the same spot, right off to the, when I'm in the pulpit, he sits right off to the right on the front row. So I always talk about him in a blue plaid shirt. And I say, you know, people that wear blue plaid shirts absolutely offend me. And so if my brother here is wearing a blue plaid shirt, how do I handle that? Do I suffer long and forbear because I know it's not violating a law of God? Or do I go to him and tell him he needs not to wear a blue plaid shirt? And if he doesn't listen, do I take a witness? Well, everybody, I mean, it's silly, right? And it's supposed to be silly because it's hyperbolic. And it's hyperbolic to illustrate the point that we are supposed to bear with people who have different ideas and different ways of behaving than we do, but yet are still functioning within the confines and parameters of God's will and God's law. So if you ever hear me talk about a blue plaid shirt, you know that I'm being absurd. I really do not think it's a sin to wear a blue plaid shirt, and I don't care if you wear a blue plaid shirt. The only reason I don't have blue plaid shirts is because my wife has not bought me any. All right. So love suffers long. Love is kind. Oh, brethren, I wish we could drive this one into our skulls. I'm going to give you an illustration that I always use, and I hope it's adequate. I hope it's not convoluted. There is a television show that I don't know if it still airs, but you can watch clips of it on YouTube. And it was the precursor to this television show that aired in the United States called Shark Tank. In the United Kingdom, it was called Dragon's Den. And the dragons were wealthy people who would listen to pitches and decide whether or not they wanted to invest for a certain stake in the company. And each dragon had different personalities. And one of the dragons, Duncan Bannatyne, he was my favorite. I really liked him as a dragon. And I find it very interesting that whenever these people come before the dragons to pitch their idea and their business and whatever to try to get investment, all pretense goes out the window. So while the dragons are just talking back and forth, they're nice. All right. But when it comes to the business, all of that goes out the window, and it's all about profit. And so this causes the dragons to be not nice, but actually it causes them to be kind. And these people get real world feedback, maybe for the first time in their business endeavor. And I remember one such episode, Duncan Bannatyne, he put his pen in his book and closed his book and set it aside. And he goes, look, I can be kind or I can be nice. He said, I tell you what, let me be nice first, with the idea that he's going to illustrate niceness. He says, your product is amazing. Your product is going to sell a lot and you're going to make a lot of money, and you have really done a good job with this product. He said, but let me be kind. Your product is terrible. You need to cut your losses now. You need not to sink one more dime into your product because you are going to lose money. He said, so because of that, I am out. And he didn't invest, and none of the dragons invested. Now, it is very difficult to hear that kind of news. But what is more profitable when you've got a bad idea and a bad product and bad research and development and bad execution? Is it better to hear all the nice things to spare your feelings, or is it better to hear to have someone be kind and tell you the things that are difficult? Folks, it is way more loving to tell those difficult things. Jesus was not nice. Please don't ever think that Jesus was nice. Jesus was kind. And if you do a word study and look at the Greek word that the word kind translates, you will go back to something very similar to the idea of employment. You have to be useful. So if I see you and you've got a black smudge across your forehead and you say, hey, how do I look? And I say, you look wonderful. Well, come on, let's go and let's go out in public. I'm nice. I didn't tell you something you didn't want to hear, but I wasn't very kind. You see, I was useless. I wasn't useful. Love, first and foremost, is useful. It's kind. So, charity suffers long and is kind. Charity doesn't envy, doesn't vaunt itself, and is not puffed up. Folks, love, and I said charity there, love is not concerned with other people. When I say concerned with other people, when I look as a loving person that loves the way God wants me to love, and I see someone's success, I don't try to take it from them. I don't try to say, well, that could have been me, that should have been me. I don't have a sour grapes mentality or anything like that. I rejoice in my brother or sister's success. I don't vaunt myself up. I don't say, oh, well, you did that. Well, you should see what I can do. I've met people a lot of times whenever you try to tell them something and you're sharing your joy with them, they take it from you and they make that about themselves. And actually, when the same goes for when you're sharing your sadness. In my younger days, before my children were born, we were first married, and I worked with an individual of whom I didn't say it, but of whom it was said that you could come to work and tell the story about your child, your baby dying, and that person would take that story away from you and make it about them. That is not loving. That is not loving at all. So we've got all that covered. Love does not rejoice in iniquity, but it rejoices in truth. There's not a lot of commentary needed there, folks. I think about Psalm 119, I believe it's 104. Through thy precepts I gain understanding. Therefore I hate every false way. It doesn't matter if the truth is hurtful to me in the moment. I rejoice in it. I'm going to tell the truth, regardless of the outcome to me or anybody else, because love rejoices in the truth. Love doesn't rejoice in iniquity. I don't look at wicked and evil things and find myself happy about it. I don't look at the things that are going on in the world and be like, oh, that's really good. I'm careful as to what I participate in. I just shared a video on the Christianity Now page where a woman that used to work in a state-run facility that housed pedophiles, she was talking about what all the pedophiles like to watch is a television program called Toddlers and Tiaras. And she said, I can't believe that these beauty pageants are still going on in the world. It's very loving for me to say that we should not participate in this. It is very unloving for me to say, well, you can't help what other people do. Dress your 6-year-old child up in hypersexualized garments and parade your 6-year-old child in front of a bunch of lecherous old men and let those people judge her on her sexuality. You see how that goes? We don't need to rejoice in iniquity. We need to rejoice in the truth. And the truth is, and I'm going to say this, it's not going to be popular. If you think it's okay, or you still put your young children in these beauty pageants, your girls especially, and you think it's okay, then you are so naive that whenever you finally meet maliciousness, malevolent forces in this world, you're going to be swallowed whole. You're not going to survive. You need somebody to hold your hand to keep you from dying. Or you're just sick. You got something wrong with you. And I'll not back down off that point. You're either almost too naive to function, or you're either almost too naive to function, or you're just sick. All right, let's keep going. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopeth all things, and endures all things. Folks, when I have interactions with other people, I always assume the best. And if the worst turns out to be true, I suffer long. I give people a pass. If I'm going to be in error, I am going to err on the side of grace and mercy. That's what love does. If someone says something to me that immediately offends me, I am going to proverbially count to 10, and I'm going to filter their statement through love. And I'm going to be like, well, this person doesn't know my inner being. They didn't know how offensive that was. And even if they did know it's offensive, they didn't know it was offensive to me. And they're just people going through their day-to-day lives. In large part, they're oblivious to the world around them, including myself. And we don't know what people are going through. All we see is the tip of the iceberg. You know, think about when you see an iceberg in the ocean. From what I understand, you see about 10% of the mass of the iceberg. 90% is under the sea. So you don't see it. So that's why love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. So that's the practice of love. If we don't practice these things, if we don't learn what they are and practice them, then we cannot emulate God, because he that loveth not knoweth not God. Why? God is love. Now, let's go to the purpose. The purpose is twofold. In the context, Paul gives the purpose of love in order to talk about the end of the age of miracles. All right? Let's look at verses 8 through 12. Love never fails, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether be tongues, they shall cease. Whether they shall be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then... And incidentally, the word then is an adverb of time, denoting a point in time from the perspective of the writing that is in the future, but yet is in the past to us. Okay? But then shall I know, even as also I am known. Well, Paul gave us the attributes of love to juxtapose the power of love really with the power of miracles, and to show that, look, miracles are going to cease, but you can always be loving. That it's just that simple. So the purpose of Paul's expounding upon what love is to say love is abiding eternally even. And then that gets us to the second purpose in the lesson here. Love is foundational to Christianity, because, well, Jesus said it in John chapter 14, verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. We want to be where Jesus is now. That's in heaven. And we want to be there for eternity. Now, Paul says something beautiful here. And now abideth faith, hope, and love, these three. But the greatest is love. Why is the greatest love? Because the system of faith is going to be done away with whenever Jesus returns. You won't need it anymore. Hope is going to be fulfilled when Jesus returns. You won't need it anymore. It'll be realized. But love is eternal. If we want to be eternal beings, we have to take on the attributes of love. That's the purpose of Paul's writing here, and that's the purpose of love. We act with the proper intentions, practicing the proper actions, fulfilling our purpose, which is to be eternal. Folks, I can't think of a better lesson for Christians. We need to learn what it means to be loving, because without it, we will not spend eternity in heaven with God the Father and Jesus Christ, his Son. And that's our ultimate goal. I hope I've said something here that's been beneficial to you, that's been profitable to you. I pray what I've said has been pleasing to God, and I hope you have a new appreciation for love. Remember, we cannot take on the attributes of God our Father without being loving, and without taking on the attributes of God our Father without being made partaker of the divine nature, we cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. We cannot enter into eternity whenever Jesus returns. Folks, this has been Tony Brewer with Cogitations. I pray that everything I've said has been profitable to you, pleasing to God. Remember, don't forget to check out LaBeth's work at beamindfulsoul.com. Don't forget to support us monetarily and share the content. Subscribe on Cogitations. And that's all I've got. Rusty Kirby says, Luke 7:47, therefore I say unto you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. Love and forgiveness are connected. That's right. That's right. Even if I wanted to, even if I were so inclined, I couldn't argue with that. Thank you, Rusty. All right. God bless everybody. Consider subscribing to the Christianity Now streams. This has been Tony Brewer with Cogitations. Don't forget our sponsor, Be a Mindful Soul. And that's all we got here. God bless, and we'll catch you on the flip side.